The people who stop chasing happiness are the ones who actually find it. Hello friends, welcome back to Mind Fuel. Today we're breaking down the book that made the entire self-help world uncomfortable. So stay till the end. You have been lied to your whole life. Someone told you to stay positive. They said happiness is the goal. Work harder. Smile more. Chase more. And you tried. You really truly tried. Here's the uncomfortable truth. That advice may be the very thing making you miserable. Americans spend over $11 billion every single year on self-help products. And yet anxiety rates have more than doubled in the last decade. Think about that for a second. We are the most self-improved, most motivated, most goal-obsessed generation in human history. And we are also the most anxious. The harder you chase feeling good, the worse you actually feel. Let that sink in. Mark Manson is not a therapist. He is not a monk on a mountain with all the answers. He is a guy who spent years failing, at relationships, at business, at figuring out who he even was. And then he sat down and wrote something that went on to sell over 15 million copies worldwide. That book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FCK. It spent years on the New York Times bestseller list. And it got there by doing something radical. It told the truth. The kind of truth the self-help industry has been too polished, too positive, too afraid to say out loud. Later in this video, I'll reveal the one idea from this book that completely changes how you see pain, failure, and the meaning of a good life. That idea will land at the very end, and when it does, you will understand why this book hit so differently from everything else on the shelf. But first, let's start where Manson starts, by blowing up everything you thought you knew about happiness. Lesson 1. Stop trying to feel good all the time. Here's the idea that kicks the whole book off, and it sounds almost offensive at first. Manson says the desire to feel good all the time is itself the problem, not the solution. The problem. Most of us were raised to believe that positive thinking is powerful, that if you just focus on the bright side, good things follow. But Manson points to something he calls the feedback loop from hell. Here is how it works. You feel anxious about a presentation at work. Then you feel anxious about feeling anxious. Then you feel guilty for not being the kind of person who handles pressure well. And now you are 3 layers deep into a spiral you never chose. The original feeling was not the problem. Our obsession with eliminating it. That is the problem. Every negative emotion you try to suppress gets louder. Every failure you pretend did not happen comes back harder. Manson says we have been taught to treat bad feelings like mistakes. But they are not mistakes. They are information. Take Nathan, a 29-year-old graphic designer in Chicago. Nathan had done everything right. Stable job, his own apartment, a relationship he thought was solid. But he woke up every morning with a low hum of dread he could not name. So he started journaling. He started meditating. He bought 3 different self-help books and worked through all of them. He tried to fix the feeling. 6 months later, the dread was worse. Not because Nathan was broken, but because he was spending more mental energy fighting his anxiety than actually living his life. When Nathan finally stopped trying to force himself to feel better, something shifted. He stopped analyzing every uncomfortable emotion. He let himself feel bad sometimes. And slowly the loop broke. The takeaway is sharp and simple. Stop treating your negative emotions like enemies. They are not signs of failure. They are signs that you are alive and paying attention. The goal is not to feel good all the time. The goal is to stop being terrified when you don't. And that one shift in how you relate to your own mind unlocks everything else in this book. Lesson 2. Pain is the compass, not the enemy. Most people think a good life means avoiding pain. But actually, pain is the only accurate map you have. This is one of the most counterintuitive ideas in the entire book. And Manson makes it almost uncomfortably clear. Here's what nobody tells you about successful people. They did not succeed because they avoided suffering. They succeeded because they chose a specific kind of suffering and refused to quit. Think about what you want in life. Maybe it is financial freedom. Maybe it is a strong body. Maybe it is a business that actually works. Now think about the pain that comes attached to each of those things. Years of financial discipline. Hours in the gym when your body is telling you to stop. 1,000 small failures before a business finds its footing. Most people want the reward, but not the grind. Manson says that is the wrong question entirely. The right question is not, what do I want? The right question is, what pain am I willing to carry? That question changes everything. Because everyone wants to be in great shape, but not everyone is willing to show up when they are sore and tired and the couch is right there. Everyone wants a great relationship, but not everyone is willing to have the hard conversations. Sit with discomfort and choose that person over and over again. The desire tells you nothing. The willingness to suffer tells you everything. Let that sink in. This is where Manson introduces what he calls the hedonic treadmill. No matter what we achieve, we quickly adapt to it. The raise becomes the new baseline. The new house stops feeling new. The excitement fades. So we chase more and more. And the treadmill keeps spinning. The people who break the cycle, they stop asking what they want. They ask what they are willing to bleed for. And then they go build that slowly, imperfectly, but on solid ground. The takeaway is this: stop chasing comfort. Start choosing your struggle, because your honest answer to "what pain can I sustain" is the most accurate reflection of who you actually are and where you are actually going. Lesson 3: you are not special. And that is the best news you will ever hear. This one might sting a little, but stay with it. Because this is the lesson that quietly sets people free. We grew up in a culture that told us we were all special. Every school trophy, every participation ribbon, every parent who said you can be anything you want. The message was, you are exceptional. You are destined for something great. Here is the problem. When everyone is told they are special, the concept loses all meaning. And worse, it creates a generation of people who are terrified of being ordinary. Manson calls this entitlement, not the lazy kind, but a subtler kind. People who have been handed an identity that requires constant external confirmation. And that confirmation never comes, not the way they expected. Meet Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing manager in London. She had spent her entire 20s waiting to feel special. Waiting for the career that felt like a true calling. Waiting for the relationship that felt like a film. Waiting for her life to look the way she had always assumed it would look. But ordinary life kept showing up instead. An okay job. An okay apartment. An okay routine. And she kept quietly feeling like she had missed something. Here is what changed everything for Sarah. She read one line that Manson wrote, and it stopped her cold. He said, "Not everyone gets to be extraordinary. Most of us will be forgotten. And that is completely fine. Because the moment you release the need to be exceptional, you are finally free to be fully present, to actually enjoy the cup of coffee, to care about the real people in front of you, to show up for your actual life instead of performing for an imaginary one." Sarah stopped waiting. She started living. And she told a friend later that it was the first time in years she had felt genuinely okay. If this breakdown is giving you something real, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to Mind Fuel. We do this every single week. And the lesson we just covered? It is only the beginning, the takeaway. Your ordinariness is not a failure. It is the soil that real life grows in. The moment you let go of the extraordinary, that is when things get genuinely interesting. Lesson 4. You always have a choice, even when you think you don't. This is the most immediately actionable idea in the book. And it is also the one that can hit hardest if you are in a tough place right now. Manson draws a distinction that most people spend years never seeing clearly. He says there is a massive difference between fault and responsibility. Things can happen to you. Things you never chose, never deserved, and cannot undo. And yet you are still completely responsible for how you respond. Fault lives in the past. Responsibility lives right now. This is not toxic positivity. Manson is not saying just think positive. He is saying something far harder than that. He is saying even in your worst moments, the bad relationship, the job that hollowed you out, the family situation you never asked for, you still have choices. Not good choices, maybe, but choices. And refusing to see them is itself a choice. Here is what most people get wrong. We confuse the absence of great options with the absence of any options at all. And the moment we tell ourselves we have no choice, we silently hand our life to someone else. A young guy named Marcus, 27, working a dead-end sales job in Atlanta, told himself for 2 years he was stuck. The economy, his background, his debt, all real things, all genuinely difficult things. But none of them were actually locking the door. What was locking the door was the story Marcus kept telling himself, that he had no agency, that the situation owned him. One afternoon he stopped and asked himself a brutal question. What choice am I pretending I don't have? And the answer came fast. He could start building a new skill on evenings and weekends. He could reach out to people working in a field he actually cared about. He could stop treating his life like something that was happening to him. Small moves, not life-changing overnight, but his. And that ownership, that single shift from victim to participant, was the hinge that everything else turned on. The takeaway is immediate. Write this down tonight. What choice am I pretending I don't have? Ask it about the thing in your life that feels the most stuck, because the answer to that question will tell you something no one else can. And what you do with that answer in the next 24 hours. That is exactly what the rest of this video is about to show you. You just sat with 4 ideas that most people spend years, sometimes decades, stumbling toward on their own. But the ideas coming up go deeper. They get more uncomfortable. And one of them is going to flip something in your brain that you will simply never be able to unflip. Lesson 5. Values are everything. But most people have terrible ones. Here's a question nobody ever actually asks you. Not your parents, not your school, not your manager during your annual review. The question is, what are your values? And more importantly, are they any good? Manson argues that most human suffering comes not from bad luck or bad circumstances. It comes from chasing the wrong things. And we chase the wrong things because we absorbed broken values without ever questioning them. He gives a list of what he calls bad values. Things like always being liked, always appearing successful, always feeling comfortable. These feel reasonable on the surface, but every single one of them is outside your control. And when your values depend on things outside your control, you are permanently at the mercy of the world. Good values, Manson says, look completely different. Honesty, vulnerability, real creative expression, standing up for people who have less power than you. These are values you can act on today, right now, in this moment, regardless of what anyone else does. Take Claire, a 41-year-old teacher in Manchester. For 15 years, she has structured her entire identity around being liked. Every decision, what she said, what she wore, which opinions she shared out loud, was filtered through one question. Will this make people think less of me? She thought this was humility. Manson would call it a subtle form of cowardice, because the value underneath, approval, was completely outside her control. Then her school went through a restructure. Suddenly, colleagues she had carefully managed impressions with for years were gone. Her social circle evaporated. And she realized she had spent 15 years building a self that only existed in other people's eyes. It collapsed overnight. The rebuild started with one brutal question. What do I actually believe when no one is watching? The answer took months, but it was the first real thing she had built. The takeaway here is direct. Write down the 3 things you are actually optimizing your life for right now. Not what you wish you were doing. What you are actually doing. Then ask, are these values inside your control? Because if they are not, you are not living your life. You are auditioning for someone else's. Lesson 6. Rejection is an act of love. This is the lesson that lands the hardest. And I want you to really sit with this one. Manson devotes a significant portion of this book to relationships, not the feel-good version, the real version. And the most honest thing he says about love is this. If you cannot say no to someone, you do not actually love them. You are using them. Think about every relationship in your life where you said yes when you meant no. Every time you agreed to avoid the fight. Every time you pretended to be okay because the alternative felt too risky. You told yourself that was love. It was not. It was fear. Manson talks about a concept he calls entitled relationships, where 2 people stay together not because they genuinely choose each other, but because they are both terrified of the alternative. No real honesty, no real friction, just a quiet, suffocating arrangement dressed up as love, and slowly, both people disappear inside it. He writes about his own relationship with his now wife Fernanda. Early on, he realized he was performing a version of himself he thought she wanted, agreeable, uncomplicated, easy. And she was doing the same. They were two people in love with each other's performance. When they finally started being honest, actually honest, it was terrifying. There were conversations that felt like the relationship might not survive them. But it did, and what came out the other side was something real. Something with roots. The story that hits me hardest in this section is not about romance. It is about a man named David, 52, who had spent 30 years never once telling his adult son the truth about his disappointments, his fears, his regrets. He thought he was protecting him. He thought a good father absorbs the pain quietly. His son grew up thinking his father was invulnerable, distant, hard to reach. When David finally opened up, during a long drive on a Tuesday night that neither of them planned, his son broke down, not from sadness, from relief. He had spent decades thinking the coldness was about him. It was never about him. 30 years of unexpressed truth, erased in one honest car ride. The takeaway is not comfortable, but it is real. The most loving thing you can do for someone is stop protecting them from who you actually are. Honesty, real honesty, even when your voice shakes, is not cruelty. It is the deepest form of respect. Lesson 7. Death is the only honest mirror. Here's what nobody tells you about the way you are living right now. Almost every choice you make, what career you stay in, what relationships you tolerate, what dreams you quietly shelve, is being made by someone who is pretending they have unlimited time. Manson goes to a place in this book that most self-help writers will not touch. He talks about death, not in a dark way, in a clarifying way. He says the only reliable tool for figuring out what actually matters to you is to hold everything up to the mirror of your own mortality. And most of us are terrified to do it. He introduces a concept from existential psychology called immortality projects. The idea is this: humans are the only animals aware that we will die. And that awareness is so overwhelming, so destabilizing, that we spend our lives building things designed to make us feel permanent. Legacy, status, a big house, a title on a business card. We construct entire identities around things that will outlast us. Because somewhere deep in the wiring, we are trying to escape the terror of being temporary. But Manson says this is the trap. The more you run from death, the more it controls your choices. The more you pursue symbolic immortality, fame, status, reputation, the less you actually live. He points to the Stoics. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in the ancient world, would begin each day by meditating on his own death, not out of morbidity, out of precision. Because when you genuinely internalize that your time is finite, the noise falls away. The petty resentments, the comparison, the performance. What is left is just, what matters to me today, right now, with the time I actually have. The takeaway is this: most of the stress you carry right now will not matter to you in your final weeks. The question worth asking, regularly, uncomfortably, honestly, is what will? Because the answer to that question is the only map worth following. Lesson 8. The do something principle. This is the last lesson before the big finish. And it is the most immediately practical thing in the entire book. So I want you to pay close attention here, because there is an action inside this lesson you can take in the next 24 hours. Manson calls it the do something principle, and it directly destroys one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves about motivation. Here is the lie. We believe motivation comes first. You feel inspired, then you act. You get confident, then you try. You feel ready, then you begin. But Manson says that equation is completely backwards. Action does not follow motivation. Motivation follows action. The inspiration comes after you start, not before. This is not a small distinction. This is the difference between people who execute and people who wait. Think about every project you have delayed because you did not feel ready. Every conversation you postponed because you did not feel confident. Every creative thing you abandoned in the planning stage because the spark was not there yet. You were waiting for the engine to start before you turned the key. Manson says just turn the key. even a tiny turn, even a wrong turn, because motion, any motion, generates momentum, and momentum generates feeling, and feeling, finally, generates motivation. Marcus, the 27-year-old from Atlanta we met earlier, did not wake up one day suddenly inspired. He picked up his phone on a random Thursday and sent 3 LinkedIn messages to people in a field he wanted to break into. No strategy, no perfect pitch. Just 3 messages. 2 were ignored. 1 turned into a conversation that changed his career path entirely. The action came before the confidence. The result came before the feeling of being ready. The 24-hour action I want you to take tonight is this: identify the one thing you have been waiting to feel ready for, and do the smallest possible version of it tonight. Not perfectly, not completely. Just begin. Send the message, open the document, make the call. Because here's what most people get wrong. They think small actions are not worth taking. But small actions are the only way any large life ever actually gets built. The idea that changes everything. Earlier in this video, I promised you one idea that changes everything. One idea that sits underneath every lesson we have covered. The idea that explains why this book hits so differently from every other self-help title you have ever picked up. Here it is. Mark Manson believes that a meaningful life is not built by having fewer problems. It is built by choosing better problems. You are always going to have problems. Always. The question is never, how do I get rid of my problems? The question is, are my problems worth having? Are they connected to something I actually care about? The person grinding through a hard workout has problems, but they chose those problems. The entrepreneur losing sleep over a product that is not working has problems, but those problems are the shape of something they are building. The parent navigating a difficult conversation with a teenager has problems, but that friction is what real love looks like in motion. That is the whole book in one idea. Stop trying to have no problems. Start choosing the right ones. And now look at every character we met today through that lens. Nathan stopped trying to eliminate his anxiety and started letting it inform him. Claire stopped chasing approval and started building values she could control. Sarah released the myth of the extraordinary and finally showed up for her actual life. David had one honest car ride and got his son back. Marcus turned the key before he felt ready and changed his own trajectory. None of them fixed their lives by removing difficulty. They fixed their lives by getting honest about what difficulty they were willing to accept and why. That is the subtle art, not giving a FCK about everything, giving every FCK you have to the things that are genuinely, honestly worth it, and nothing else. If this video gave you something real today, and I genuinely hope it did, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps more people find this content. Subscribe to Mindfuel if you are not already here, because every single week we break down books like this one, books that actually change how you think. And drop 1 word in the comments below. Just one. The 1 word that describes what you are going to stop giving a FCK about starting today. I read every single one. This was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FCK by Mark Manson. I will see you in the next one.